family, and welcome back to another installment of Noonday Nourishment and online Bible studies on Fridays. Whether you're watching us on Friday live at 12 noon Eastern Standard Time or watching the replay, let us know in the chat that you are here. Give us a little greeting, a little hello. We are so glad that each of you have intentionally decided to engage in this Bible study as we look together as a community into God's Word. This week we are continuing our Bible study series entitled Fatal Attraction, a Bible study on Samson, and we're looking at the pitiful fall of a powerful man. Last week we looked at one of the things that Samson had contributed to his fall was the attraction to happiness over holiness, and that was rooted in Judges chapter 13, where we looked at our pursuit of holiness will make us happy, but our pursuit of happiness alone will lead to a road of destruction. And we distinguish between what both of those look like. This week, we are going to be looking at Judges chapter 14, going into the next chapter. And today we're going to talk about the attraction to selfishness over the attraction to sacrifice. The attraction to selfishness over sacrifice. Now, Judges chapter 14 is a wild and crazy story, family. So to help us better understand this chapter, we're going to split this chapter up into three sections, or I like to call just 3 episodes, because again, this is an interesting chapter that has a lot of action that's happening. I pray that you've had time to read that in your personal time, and that you pause this video even now to read Judges chapter 14 as we look at that together today. Remember from last week, Samson has been called. Remember, he has a special Nazirite vow. That call is to live a separate, a different, and a holy life dedicated and consecrated unto God. Now we see him at the beginning of this chapter in 14. He has now been born and he is now of age, in which he's now going and traveling to a place called Timnah. Timnah was a border city. It was between Israel and the Philistine territory. In fact, it was right near the tribe of Judah. And remember, the Philistines are the age-old enemies of the Israelites. This city used to belong to the Danaanites, but the Philistines had taken this land over. So there is great tension between the Philistines and the Israelites, even over this little city called Timnah. So Samson decides that he's going to Timnah, and tensions are already high on his decision. Samson goes, and Timnah from where he is going, and Zorah from where he is about a 6-mile difference between both of them. And he goes to Timnah and he finds himself a fine-looking sister. But he forgets some things, and his selfishness begins to arise, because as fine as this sister is, she is part of the enemy territory, again, the Philistine group. Now remember, the Israelites were captured by the Philistines, and God had sent Samson to help deliver the Israelites from the hand of the Philistines. And so Samson is sent to confront the Philistines, but it seems as though he's getting cozy with them. Samson finds some time to be selfish and to abort his mission to have his way. And so he sees this sister, and in fact, we find out that part of the reason why the Israelites are part of the captivity, are in captive, because they are part of the Philistine nation. And so Samson already knows that he has no business whatsoever going over there. Let alone also getting a spouse from the enemy territory as well. She's like that family. Remember, I told her 11 o'clock and 6:30 Bible classes that she's like that family that in your neighborhood, your parents, your grandparents, whoever told you, don't talk to that family down the road. They don't mean you any good. They're going to make you harm, right? They're fast, or they're no good for you, right? The same thing is happening with the Philistines and the Israelites. They traditionally do not intermingle and do not associate, because they've been age-old enemies for a few reasons. One, because of their geography, but also because of their religion. Remember, the Israelites believed the one true God, and the Philistines worship pagan gods. And so there's always been some tension between both groups. So Samson gets there and he sees a woman and he wants her for himself. He's getting ready to base his entire life off of what he sees. Watching Judges chapter 14, you'll see the word see a few times in there again, because Samson is basing his decisions on what he sees with his natural eye. He is getting ready to hook himself up for the rest of his life through marriage with someone or something that he has only laid his eyes on. They ain't had no conversation. They ain't had no date. They ain't been to the movies. He ain't paid for no meals. But he sees something and he demands what he sees. How selfish can Samson be? Before you and I get off this note, let me pause and ask, how many times have you and I almost or really actually based our whole life off of our natural sight? How many times have we saw something knowing that it was not good for us, just like Samson and this woman, but you wanted that thing so bad for yourself that you was willing to do whatever you could in order to get it? You didn't do no research. You didn't pray about it. You didn't discern it. You didn't read God's word. You didn't seek any sound advice. You didn't ask the Lord, but you saw something with your natural eye and you said, doggone it, I gotta have it. There were jobs that we took and we had an eye on it and we saw how good it was going to be. We saw the position, we saw the status, we saw the salary. And as soon as we got the job, we were ready to quit because it looked good to our natural eye, but it wasn't all that it was cracked up to be. There were people that we attached ourselves to that it looked good for us to be associated with them. And it looked good to have them on our arm. And it looked good to have them in our friendship circles. But knowing good and well that they didn't have the same values. They didn't worship the same Lord. They didn't add anything to our lives. But because we saw it, we wanted it right then and there. There were some food items that you and I wanted. Yeah, I'm going there. This weekend, in fact, we saw it and we wanted it real bad. But we know we're not supposed to be eating it. We know the doctor told us to stay away from foods like that. We know that it's not going to have a good outcome for us. But because we saw it, we desired it. And family, when we base things off of our natural eye, we will always act selfishly. In fact, our human nature is to act selfishly. Well, beloved, remember that God has called us into community and to a higher calling. Remember our lesson from last week about our higher calling to holiness in the community sense that our actions have implications on other people, and our calling to God's service and to holiness goes beyond our selfish desires. In other words, you can't base your whole life off of what you see only. I want you to see here that remember Samson's one job is to deliver the people of Israel from the Philistines. That was his commission since Judges 13, since his inception into the earth. But now Samson is getting ready to marry something that the Lord is trying to deliver him from. How many times have we married or hooked up with things, people, habits, attitudes, languages that the Lord was trying to deliver us from? If the Lord is trying to deliver you from something, don't get closer to it like Samson did. The Lord is trying to take you out of it. Our selfish desires, although, will get in the way and make us complicit in trying to cozy up with things that are not good for us and wanting us to engage in activities that will negatively impact us. And because we listen to our selfish desires, we will stay longer in our situation. Some of us, hear this, we will grow roots in places that God is trying to uproot you from. Samson was one of those persons trying to grow roots in a place that was not meant for him to be. He was meant to confront that place, not to cozy up to that place. And he married something, hooked up with something that the Lord was trying to deliver him out of. Fortunately, Samson didn't learn this lesson. So he goes home and he demands that he gets what he wants. He disgraces his family, he disgraces his people, he disgraces his community because he intentionally decided that based off of his natural eye, he wants to get closer to this. God, however, wants to distance him from it. Samson wants to marry it, join in for the rest of his life. God wants to deliver them from it for the rest of their lives. I mean, if you draw back from this story, it also shows Israel's unwillingness to willingness rather, to coexist with something that is meant to be temporary. God sent Samson again to confront. Look at verse 4 there. But instead, Samson gets cozy. So too did the Israelites get cozy in their situation, and God has not called them to get cozy in temporary things. And so we see in Samson's story, his first selfish act is that he bases his life on only what he sees. As we progress through the story, that's 1 through 5 of chapter 14, we look at the second portion, or second episode of this story in Judges chapter 14, verses 5 through 10. We now see that Samson gets his way, and he's getting ready to get married to this woman that he only saw. He travels down the road to Timnah, and he encounters now a lion coming at him. Now the Lord gives Samson supernatural strength to deal with this lion. But the question still remains that while we know as the readers where his strength comes from, I'm not sure that at this moment Samson recognizes where his strength comes from. The lion for us can signify for us a situation that the Lord allows to happen as a way to remind Samson of his power and also of his purpose. Because every now and again, we need a reminder of what our purpose is. And we can get distracted, as Samson has done prior to this moment, by our selfish wants and desires, that we lose sight of the purpose that God has given us. God had given Samson supernatural strength, not for the purpose of just tearing up a lion, not for the purpose of exerting it over people, not for the purpose of using it for his self-gain. God had given Samson this supernatural strength to help deliver himself and his people out of captivity. Samson lost sight of that. And sometimes you and I lose sight and get distracted of our purpose that we have in God. And every now and again, God will put a lion, God will put something in our way to get our attention and remind us of what we've been called to. The problem in this text, though, is, family, that it seems as though Samson doesn't like to learn his lessons. Samson did not see this lion as a reminder of his purpose, but he saw this as just another obstacle getting in the way of his selfish desires. And so Samson then returns back to go get his wife in Timnah, and on his way back, he sees the lion that he split open. And he sees in the carcass of the lion how some bees have made a hive and now honey in the dead lion. So Samson scoops up the honey out of the dead lion's carcass. Now, if you're a good Bible reader and you tuned in with us last week, you will remember that there's a problem with this action. Now, I know this seems kind of out of whack. This seems like an interesting story here, that Samson would scoop some honey out of a dead lion's carcass. But I want you to understand why this is important. In order for you to understand this, you must remember that Samson was a Nazirite. A Nazirite was one who had 3 simple rules. Here, my good Bible study readers, remember. Number 1, no alcohol. Number 2, no haircut. And number 3, here it is, you could not touch a dead thing or consume anything that was unclean. Here in Judges chapter 14, we see Samson violating his 3rd vow unto God. He touches something unclean and he consumes of it. Samson forgets his vow because he is masked by the sweet taste of selfishness. And how many times, family, have you and I forgotten what we were supposed to be doing? We were supposed to be living holy lives because we were enticed, we were tempted, or we were lured by the sweet things of life. It was a sweet taste that drew Samson away. And family, you and I have allowed sometimes the sweet taste of our pleasures and our desires to draw us away from holiness, away from right living, away from growing, away from developing as Christians. We told ourselves just this one time, and that's it after this. We told ourselves, like Samson, ain't nobody around, there's nobody looking. We told ourselves, since it's here, it must be for me to take. We told ourselves, it's calling my name. I need to have this thing. I need to have this person. I need to engage in this activity. And all the while we've been partaking in these sweet things, we have forgotten our vow to God. We have neglected our walk with Christ. We have put aside our calling to fulfill. And Samson allowed something sweet to distract him from his calling and defile him of his vow unto God. But wait, there's more in the text, because in verse 9, it then says that Samson not only defiled himself by eating of something that was unclean and forgetting or neglecting his vow unto God, but secondly, we also see that he not only consumed it himself, but he took it home and he gave it to his parents. And your Bible says that when he gave the honey to his parents that he wasn't supposed to have in the first place, he didn't even tell his parents where he got it from. This is important, because if you go back to Judges chapter 13, verse 16, remember the angel of the Lord came to the mother and the father and said that this baby named Samson is to be dedicated to God and be a Nazirite. But the angel also gave the same Nazirite instructions to the parents as well. So not only was Samson not supposed to eat anything unclean, but his parents were not supposed to as well. Here's the point. Samson not only neglected his vow, but did something he was not supposed to do, but he included other people in his evil actions as well and didn't even notify them. I mean, it's one thing to know what you're not supposed to do and still do it anyway. It's another thing to drag people down with you. Family, our personal actions have communal effects. And maybe it's time for us to do an evaluation of our lives to see if you are the source of uncleanliness or contaminating or infecting those around you. Because sin is contagious. And the more we enjoy it, the more we will tell other people about it and join us in it. And if we are not careful, we will drag people into the same sinful, carnal, ungodly, and selfish acts that we've been dealing with. Samson neglects his godly calling and lures other people as well to defile themselves. So again, we see as his second selfish act. His selfish act was that he neglected his godly calling. The third and final portion of this text, or episode of this text, takes place in Judges chapter 14, verses 10 through 20. Samson now moves from trying to get his wife, and it's now wedding day. Matter of fact, it's the bachelor party. He's chilling with the Israelites and the Philistines. He's chilling with some boys, and Samson decides to play a little game. Remember, Samson always thinks that he's the smartest guy in the room. And so he decides to tell them a riddle. And he makes a bet that they can't solve this riddle. Out of the eater, something to eat. Family, the men that he's challenged to solve this riddle cannot figure it out for about 3 days. But of course, they don't know what's happening because they weren't with Samson to decipher that this riddle he's put before the men is an isolated situation. The answer to this riddle is what we just talked about, this lion and this bee, or the lion and the honey rather. But family, they don't know that. Samson's the only one who saw all of this happen. So Samson presents this riddle, and he knows it's impossible for them to understand. So the men get real frustrated, y'all, and the men go to Samson's wife and blackmails her to get the answer out of Samson. So the men come to Samson and say, we know the answer to your riddle. They tell him the answer, and Samson gets so upset because he finds out, hear this, y'all, that his own wife had betrayed him and given the answer to the riddle to the men he had challenged. They cheated in essence. And so Samson goes to another place. He pays off his bet. His lasting portion of this text reveals to us that Samson gets all messed up. He gets all angry. He gets all mad because he's been betrayed and he's been manipulated. He feels so bad, in fact, that he leaves his wife, doesn't go on the honeymoon, but he leaves his wife because he feels so upset that he has been betrayed by somebody so close to him. The lesson that Samson learns is that selfishness attracts selfishness. For just as he betrayed others, now he is being betrayed in this situation. Remember, Samson was selfish and he betrayed his vow to God. He was selfish and he betrayed his parents by defiling them. He was selfish and he betrayed people at the wedding by giving them a riddle that he knows is impossible, but seemed or wanted to seem like to be the smartest and the strongest man in the room. And now Samson is surprised. He shouldn't be, that somebody is now acting selfishly towards him. Family, game means game. What goes around comes around. What you reap, you will sow. And just like he betrayed others, now he is betrayed himself. And as a result, Samson gets back to a place of comfort. He goes back to his daddy's house. He leaves his wife. Because again, the same thing he did to others has now happened to him. And he can't take the fact that he lost. He could dish it, but he couldn't take it. Samson's selfish act was in betrayal. The thing with being selfish is that it would allow you to do anything to anybody for any reason. As long as you come out on top, as long as you get what you want, it would allow you to take advantage of people. It will allow you to get over on people. It will allow you to say one thing and do another. But the thing to remember is that just as selfish as you are towards others, don't forget that people can be selfish towards you as well. Just as you have done dirty towards other people, don't you forget that people can return that favor back unto you. Just as you have pulled the wool over people's eyes, so too can people do the same back unto you. Samson has to learn this lesson through a series of betrayal and manipulation, because the same thing he's put out is now coming to his front door. Here's the question: what in your life have you been selfish with? I mean, Samson has to have a moment in which he looks in the mirror, understand that he's really been selfish majority of his life, picking up and putting down this vow to God whenever he felt like it, whenever it pleased him, whenever it suited him. But family, maybe Samson can learn, and maybe you and I can learn better, to ask, what if people were selfish towards us like we were selfish towards them? I mean, maybe the better question for us is, what if God was selfish towards us like we've been selfish towards him or towards others? And so his third selfish act is that he manipulates and he betrays. I'm done, but as a means of summary, just to look at this story again, we see that Samson, majority of his life, has been acting selfishly. And this Nazirite call, this call of holiness, this call to a different standard, to consecration and dedication unto God, will sometimes cause us to move away from our selfish acts and to move towards sacrifice. I mean, if Samson had been reminded of his calling to sacrifice over selfishness, then he would have not married something that God was trying to deliver him from. If Samson was reminded of his sacrifice over selfishness, then he would have not defiled himself and defiled others as well. If Samson was reminded of his sacrifice over selfishness, maybe he would not have used his wit and his strength to get over and to take advantage of other people. The reminder of the story of Samson is that God has sometimes called you and I to make some sacrifices. Not to give to our pleasures, not to give to our desires, not to give to our human and natural sight. There are some things that you and I have to say no to. There are some things that you and I got to check ourselves before we wreck ourselves. There are some things that you and I must give up. There are some things that you and I must distance ourselves from. There are some things that you must set aside in order to be right with God and for the betterment of our community. And whatever your sacrifice is, whether it's funds or resources, whether it's habits, whether it's certain pleasures we enjoy, whether it's attitudes, whether it's things that get you distracted, whatever it is, there will always sneak up to be an attraction to act selfishly. But God, I know we don't like to talk about it, sometimes have called us to sacrifice our selfish wants and desires for His will and for His way. I'm done, family, but this week I want you to reflect on this story of Samson and ask yourself, what ways have you been selfish, self-centered, self-absorbed, self-righteous even? And then ask yourself, where's God leading and calling you to sacrifice some of those selfish thoughts and desires for His will, for His way, and ultimately His purpose for your life? I want to thank you for joining us for another Noonday Nourishment. I pray that something helped to challenge or to uplift or to encourage you in this lesson. For further discussion on the story of Samson, join us every Wednesday at 11 a.m. and 6:30 p.m. via Zoom as we discuss together in a community kind of space. Or you can join us here on Facebook and YouTube every single Friday at 12 noon for another Noonday Nourishment. I pray God's blessings upon each and every one of you. I'm Pastor AJ. I pray you have a blessed and a safe week. Until next time.